All right, we've almost got a full house here, so we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully if anyone else wants to join, they'll make their way over here. But welcome everyone, good morning. My name is Cassian. I'm here today from the Vermont Institute of Natural Science down in Quechee, Vermont. Has anyone here been to VINS before?
Yes.
No. Yeah, awesome. Okay, I have another question for you then. What kinds of animals do we have at VINS? Raise your hand if you have an animal that we have. Yeah. We have birds, yep. What else do we have? We have more than birds. Go ahead. Gorilla, I wish we had a gorilla. That would be really cool. Yeah, what else do we have? We have owls, yeah, owls are one of the types of birds we have. We also have something that's not a bird. Does anyone know what animals we have that aren't birds?
Turtles.
We have turtles, yes, and there's one more thing that we have. Something that slithers on the ground. A lot of people are afraid of them, yeah.
Snakes!
Snakes, yes.
Kind of snakes?
We have corn snakes at VINS.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
illegal.
What?
Not deadly snakes like boa constrictors?
Not boa constrictors? No, we don't have any boa constrictors. That would be cool though. So at VINS, we got a lot more people coming in. Hello everyone. If you can try and find a seat, that would be great. I don't know if there's any extra chairs anywhere. But today, I am here to bring you some owls, one of the birds that we have. So we have a lot of different types of birds at VINS, but we specialize in the pointy variety, aka birds of prey, or raptors. And these raptors, there's a bunch of different birds that are considered raptors. Raptors includes eagles, includes hawks, falcons, owls, and vultures. And they all have a couple key characteristics that make them raptors. And we're going to learn a little bit about what makes a raptor once we meet some of our birds. But before I bring out my first guest, I would like to know, what do you all know about owls? Does anyone know a fact about owls that they learned before today? Yeah, what do you know about owls?
They go at night and sometimes at day.
They're active at night and sometimes at day. Excellent.
The babies are cute.
And they're very cute, yes. Yeah, what do you know about owls? They're nocturnal, yes, they're active at night. What else? What do they look like? What do they sound like? Anyone have any ideas before we meet them? Yeah, back there.
So owls, when they eat like a mouse or something,
Yeah,
they can't digest the bones at first, so they throw it up.
exactly. They produce pellets of all the stuff they can't eat. Excellent. All right, one more fact about owls, yes. Yes, they fly silently. All right, well this is awesome. You all know a lot about owls, so hopefully I can teach you a little bit more. I'm gonna wait until everyone's hopefully sitting, because one thing that you should know about owls is that they can be a little bit nervous about noise and movement. So when we do have the owls out, I would really appreciate if you could stay sitting. Please do not approach me, it may scare our owls. And also, even though we're really excited, just try and keep our voices down and prevent from moving the chairs around, because if the owls get scared, then they can't stay out for very long. And we want them to stay out and say hi for as long as possible. All right? Awesome. Yep, if you're standing in the back, that should be totally fine. But just, yeah, try not to move around too much. All right, now I'm going to play a sound, and I want you to guess if you think that this bird is going to be an owl or not. Because I have 3 birds here today, one's down there over there, but only 2 of them are owls. So when I play this sound, I want you to raise your hand if you think it's an owl, and if you know what it is, don't give it away, because I'm going to have you try and guess once we meet them. Raise your hand if you think that was the sound of an owl. Okay, some people think it was an owl. All right, let's find out. See if our first guest is ready to make his appearance. Okay. Look. Ready? Come on out. All right, our first owl's feeling a little bit shy right now, so we're gonna go ahead and switch to our second owl, and we'll come back to him later and see if he wants to come on out and hang out with us. It might be a lot for him in this room, people moving around. Okay. Switching gears, I will play you a different sound, and we're gonna find out what this animal is. Whoop. Okay, hopefully come back to that one. Now, same question, we'll play a sound, and if you think it is an owl, raise your hand. Okay, let's see. Hopefully we'll have a little better luck with this guy. All right, I apologize, the owls are really taking their time this morning. They're not usually active in the morning, so they're very slow today. This is a good time, though, to talk about our choice-based training, which is that we don't make the owls do anything, so I'm not going to grab them out of their crates if they don't want to. We don't want to put them in an uncomfortable situation. So all we can do is ask for them to come out and hope that they want to. There we go. Come on, Miami. Okay. I'm so sorry about this. Our owls are not being cooperative today. We cannot control how they are feeling about the space or about the noises that they're hearing. So we're going to go to my third guest, and we're going to go back to these two, and we're going to hope that they would like to make an appearance. All right. All right. Final call. Now you're going to get to hear all three of them at the very beginning. And raise your hand if you think this is a call of an owl. A couple of you think it's an owl, okay. Let's find out. All right. This here is not an owl. Sorry to start off our owl program with not an owl, but hopefully if we give the other owls a little bit of time to chill in the space, they'll want to come out and say hello. This here is actually a falcon. Does anyone have any idea what type of falcon he is or what species? Yeah, what is he? That is a really good guess. His bigger cousin, the peregrine falcon, is kind of similar to him, but a lot bigger. So he's not a peregrine. You have a guess? What do you think? What kind of bird is he? It's okay if you don't have a guess. Oh, not a peregrine falcon. Yes, this here is an American kestrel. They are the smallest species of falcon that can be found in North America. This guy's name in particular is Ferrisburg. He's been on our team for 6 years now. And that call that we heard before he came out, that's called a killie call. And kestrels, they don't tend to call a lot. When they do make that call, it means that they are scared of something or they are alarmed. So that call is how they use to communicate with other kestrels in the area to let them know that maybe something is dangerous. I've only heard it make it a couple times, usually when a dog walks by. He is afraid of dogs. Thankfully, I don't see any dogs here. This call, however, is not a scared call. This here is a baby begging call. He will probably make that for most of the time that we're out here. I get to talk over it. So I'll talk a little bit more about why he makes that call in a few moments. But first, he is not an owl, but he is a raptor. So he shares some characteristics with owls. Does anyone have any observations about Ferrisburg here? Something that he has on his body that helps him to hunt for food? Yeah, what does he have? He has a sharp beak. Yes, exactly. So kind of hard to see if you're far away, but he does have that sharp hooked beak that all of our raptors have. And that enables them to tear up their food into itty bitty bite-sized pieces. What else does Ferrisburg have that would help him to catch food in the wild? Yes. Did he? Oh yeah, birds poop. Yeah, what else does Ferrisburg have? Talons, yeah, exactly. So these birds have sharp talons on the ends of their feet, and those talons are what enable them to grab and hold on to their prey. They also have pretty strong feet that enables them to squeeze their prey, like a mouse. Now, his grip strength in his feet is probably only about like 20 pounds per square inch, which maybe doesn't seem very impressive, but the average human is about 60 pounds per square inch. And we are much, much, much bigger than him. So it's very impressive a little guy could even squeeze that much in his feet. So all of our raptors have that hooked beak, they have those sharp talons. They also have something else that we also have in order to see their prey. Yes, eyes. And do you know, where do his eyes face? Do they face sideways or do they face forward? Kind of hard to tell, but hopefully if he looks straight at you, you can see. Look that way. Any guesses? Sideways. From the side, it kind of looks like maybe they're sideways, but if he looks straight at you, you can see that his two eyes are actually looking at you at the same time. He has forward-facing eyes. The really fancy scientific word for that is binocular vision. So just like us, we have two eyes that are facing forward, and that gives us depth perception. So if you want to do a little bit of an experiment, if you close one eye, hold out your thumb and try and block out Ferrisburg with your thumb, and then switch your eyes, but keep your thumb there. What happened? You can see him after you switch your eyes, right? That's because our two eyes are getting a slightly different picture, a slightly different view of what we're looking at, and that tells us exactly how far away something is from us. So for him, that's really important because he has to know exactly where that prey is so that he can grab it. Any ideas on what a kestrel like this would eat out in the wild? What might a kestrel want to eat? Do they eat fruit and berries and seeds? No. Songbirds would eat berries, but he's not a songbird. He eats meat. What little things might he be finding outside? Maybe things you find running around your garden. Yeah, what might he eat? Spiders, sure, he could eat spiders. Yeah, back there. Mice, absolutely, he would love a mouse. Were you gonna say mice too? Awesome.
My mom said they're cleaning up and eat all the clips in our house.
We have mice in our house. Yeah. Yeah, he'll eat other small things, maybe like voles as well, other types of insects, especially things you find flying around your yard. And so that means that these guys are actually excellent pest control. If you're having a mouse problem or a bug problem, a mosquito problem in your yard, you might need to call in one of the experts. These guys are cavity nesting birds. They like to live in little cavities inside maybe old dead trees, but they'll also live in human-made nest boxes or bird boxes. So if you're interested in having a little kestrel, an adorable little guy, living on your property, you can either build a nest box on your own, or you could buy one from someone who does build them and put it up in your yard. And as long as they have a nice space around to hunt, they might help to keep your property mosquito or mouse free, which is awesome. Now, I did mention his little baby call that he's making right now. So that is quite unusual. Like I said, he is 6 years old. He is full grown. He will not get any bigger for the rest of his life. He was full grown from just a couple weeks old. However, he still has that baby call. That is the same call that a little baby kestrel would be screaming in the nest to tell its parents, "This is my mouth, put the food in here." So why does he still have that call? Well, unfortunately, when he was very little, he was kidnapped from the wild. We don't exactly know why this happened. Maybe someone found him and thought he was injured, or maybe they just thought he was really, really cute. And they were like, "Oh, what a cute little kestrel. I think we should take it home and have it as a pet." Do you think that Ferrisburg made a very good pet? No, he did not make a good pet. He scratches up everything with his talons, tears it up with his beak, and he poops every 15 minutes. So, for whatever reason, they decided, having a pet kestrel isn't for us. And they brought him to a rehab center, which is great. They brought him to the people who could take care of him. However, there was a problem. He'd been living with them for so long that he never learned how to hunt in the wild. He became what we call imprinted on humans. Has anyone heard that term before, imprinting, when we talk about birds? Yeah, do you know what it means?
Once the first time they open their eyes, the first thing that they think is that's your mama, and then they live with them forever.
Yes, that was a pretty good explanation. It's actually not quite as specific as that. It's not necessarily the first thing they see, but it's something that if they're with you for a couple days, up to a week, then that's when they're gonna start to think, "Oh, I am a human," right? He didn't think he was a little kestrel. He was living amongst humans. He was probably watching TV, eating French fries. He didn't know how to survive out in the wild. And so he would never be able to be released, because if we did try to release him, he would probably just come flying back inside, begging for food. So that is Ferrisburg's story, and that is why he is here with us today as an ambassador of his species. Does anyone have any questions about Ferrisburg or about American kestrels? Yes. How big are their wings? Their wings are not very long, and I actually do have some kestrel wings to show you after this, so you can see exactly how long they go. And we'll talk a bit more later about why their wings are not as long as some other animals like hawks and owls. Yeah, what's your question?
How long can they live?
How long can they live? Great question. So generally our smaller birds, they live for less time. So he would hopefully live into his teens, maybe up to 15. Yeah, what's your question?
Well, has he ever pooped on you?
Absolutely.
Where? On your head?
Not on my head. He wouldn't be on my head. Usually just on my hand or on my foot. Yeah.
What's the territory?
How big is their territory? Territory is not particularly big because they are small, but they do maintain their own territory about a couple, maybe up to a square mile, maybe a little bit more.
And are they just in North American bird?
Yes, they are found all across North America, but there's other types of kestrels that are found on the other side of the other side of the world in the Eastern Hemisphere. Yep, but these guys can be found all through North America and even South America. Yes?
Why do they have dots on their belts?
That's a really good question. So he's got a lot of dots on him. He's actually what I would like to call North America's most colorful bird of prey. Most of our birds of prey are kind of just brown and gray and beige, but he's kind of bluish and reddish. So he has some cool coloration. Now, the spots that are all over his body, we don't actually exactly know why they have those. A lot of the times we don't know why animals are the color that they are. For example, we don't know why a red-tailed hawk has a red tail. We just know that they do. So there was clearly something throughout evolution that prompted them to have that coloration. Perhaps those spots help him to blend in with the grasslands. He likes to hunt in prairies and grasslands, and maybe that kind of makes him look more like a bit of grass with some shadows on it. But he does have some other spots that are on the back of his head. And if you squint a little bit, you might suspect that they resemble two eyes and a beak. Now, of course, he's not going to be fooling any of us right here, but to a predator, those might act as false eye spots, kind of like some butterflies have those big spots that look like eyes. So, believe it or not, even though he is a predator himself, he does also have predators, especially other birds, bigger birds like hawks or other bigger falcons. And so those eye spots might help to fool other birds into thinking that this little kestrel is looking straight at them. Now, the great thing about kestrels is even though they're small, they are incredibly quick and agile, so they could easily escape in a flighted chase. So a hawk probably isn't going to bother chasing after a kestrel if it thinks it's looking straight at it, because there's no way that it would win. Yeah, do you have another question?
You know that the brightest and most colorful birds are actually deadly. If an animal eats them, the animal that ate the bird dies.
I didn't know that there were any animals that had poisonous colors. That would be pretty cool, though. I know that some amphibians have poison in their skin. But I don't know of any birds that have poison in their skin. Any final questions here about Ferrisburg? Yeah. What environment? Yeah, that's a great question. Usually we think of birds as living in like woods and such, but he actually prefers things like grasslands and prairies and fields and meadows, even farmland. So he likes to hunt in open areas. Probably easier for him to find a lot of little bugs that way. Yes. All right. If that was our last question, I'm going to go ahead and put Ferrisburg back in his crate. All right, before I try to bring our owls out again, I have some cool wings to show you. So, two different kinds of wings here. I have some owl wings and I have some kestrel wings. So, I'm going to have these two as an example. Raise your hand if you think that this one is the owl wing. Raise your hand if you think if this one is the owl wing. Yes, that is correct. So, this wing comes from a kestrel, just like Ferrisburg. Now, you may notice it is a different color than Ferrisburg was. In fact, I have two kestrel wings here, and they are different colors. Any guesses as to why these two wings are not the same colors? In the pink all the way back there, yes. All the way back. Does anyone have a guess for why they are? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So Ferrisburg was a male kestrel. We know that because he has blue wings. But a female kestrel would have red wings. But what you'll notice about these is they have a very different shape. So falcon wings are pointed and short. They are designed for going fast. That's because often they are either pursuing prey on the wing, like those insects, they're chasing them through the air, or they are diving down for their food in what we call a stoop. So a kestrel could probably only go up to 60 miles per hour in a stoop, which is still pretty fast. It's almost as fast as we drive on the highway. But a peregrine falcon has been known to go up to 240 miles per hour in a stoop. So that shape of the wing really helps them to be quite aerodynamic and fast, slicing through the air. Versus our owl wings. So this is probably from a similarly sized bird as compared to a kestrel, but you notice the wing is a little bit bigger, a little bit broader, and also it's a little bit softer. So at the end of the program, you'll all get a chance to come up and touch any of the biofacts that you want, and so then you'll get to see exactly how soft they are compared to a falcon wing. But there's a couple reasons for this, and one of them was mentioned earlier, which is that owls are silent flyers. So one of the ways that they fly silently is by having those soft wings, because when they flap their wings, the feathers are all moving against each other and creating friction. But if the wings are really soft, they're going to create a little bit less friction when they're moving, and it's going to be a lot more quiet. Now, owls also have bigger, broader wings, which simply means that they can glide for longer periods of time. They're not trying to go fast, they're trying to go slow and stealthy. And so by having those wings, they don't have to flap their wings as much, and therefore they can glide through the night, and we wouldn't even hear if they were going by a couple feet away from us. Do you have a question about the wings? Yeah, go ahead. Where do we get them? That's a great question too. So we also have at VINS, we have our ambassador birds. We also have our Center for Rehabilitation, AKA our bird hospital, that takes in injured and orphan patients from people just like you and hopefully nurses them back to health so that they could be released. But for sometimes those birds do not make it. Either they're very sick or very injured. And in those cases, when those birds pass away, we'll take some of their wings or their feet or their skulls, which then we can use to keep educating people about their species. Yes, back there in the gray. How long does an owl live for? It depends on the type of owl. Smaller owls probably into their teens or maybe 20, like Ferrisburg. Bigger owls could live into their 20s, maybe up to 30. Okay, I'm gonna hopefully get out an owl for us now. We'll see if they've had enough relaxation time in there. All right, our big owl is still saying no thank you. Let me try a small owl. All right. Thank you greatly for your patience. Just a reminder, we're going to try and stay quiet and calm so that he continues to want to hang out with us. Because like I said, they can be a little bit nervous. That's why they didn't want to come out right away. But here is our first owl to meet. So cast your minds back to those calls I played. This was the second call that we heard. It was very high-pitched, and it sort of went downhill. That call is called a whinny, and it belongs to this particular type of owl. Does anyone know what species of owl I have out right now? Yes. Great horned owl is a good guess because he does have those little horns sticking up, but a great horned owl would be much bigger than him. Even a baby great horned owl would be bigger than him just one day after hatching. Any other guesses? It's a tricky one. Yeah, all the way back there. Yes, that's right. This is an eastern screech owl. So in the US, we have two types of screech owls. We have eastern screech owls found east of the Rocky Mountains, and we have western screech owls found west of the Rocky Mountains. So very appropriate name for those two species. And they look very, very similar. Now, they do make that sort of whinny call, but with their name, what kind of call do you think they would make? Yeah. Yeah, you would think that they would make screeching noises. And the funny thing is, they don't really. They don't really screech. And we don't know exactly how they got that name, screech owl. Perhaps someone saw one of these owls in the woods, and then they heard, a fox yelling off in the distance, and they thought, oh, that owl is making that noise. Must be a screech owl. But we're not exactly sure why they're called screech owls, because the sounds that they do make are whinnies and trills. Your snack? So, the whinny is what we heard earlier, and it's called that because it sounds just like a tiny horse. Ooh, that descending note. And that whinny in the wild is actually a territorial call. To us, it sounds super cute and adorable, but to another screech owl, that means, this is my territory, get out. Raptors are not social creatures. They do not want to be hanging out with other raptors unless it is breeding season and they're hanging out with their mate. But otherwise, they want their territory all to themselves. So if you hear that whinny in the night, it is one of these guys trying to fend off from any invaders into his territory. The other sound that they make is very similar, but it's called a trill or a tremolo, and it's just on one note, sort of like that. And that call is more of a communication call, letting maybe their mate know, oh, I'm over here, or here's the nest, and sort of just communicating back and forth. In his case, he doesn't really make either of those sounds. If you can hear it, he's sort of making a bit of a, I wouldn't really call it a screech, but he's just making a food begging call, sort of like our kestrel was. Now that we do have an owl out, does anyone have any observations about how this owl is different to Ferrisburgh? What is different about him? We already know they have some similarities, like their talons and their sharp beak and those eyes, but what is different? Yeah. Yes, he's got little ear tufts, little horns on the top of his head. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. What else is different about him compared to Ferrisburgh? Yeah. His coloration, yeah. He's a lot more brown and gray. Why do you think he would be that color? Do you have a guess? Because he lives in trees, and what would this enable him to do? Yeah, exactly. It helps him to hide in the trees. Great. Yes. What else do you notice about him? Mm-hmm. He has a bigger head, and yeah, his body is maybe a little bit more sleek. Ferrisburgh's body was a bit more round. Yeah, what else do you notice?
His eyes are bigger.
He has bigger eyes. Yes, for sure. Owls have huge eyes. One more thing. He's a little bit fluffier, yeah. Like I said, owls are softer than other birds. Fortunately, I can't let you pet the birds, but again, I do have wings that you can touch later and see exactly how soft they are. So, those were all some really great observations. Let's start with the eyes. So his eyes are huge. If our eyes were the same proportion to our skull as his are to his skull, our eyes would be the size of our fists in our heads. Now that would be a little bit ridiculous. But for him, it is a great advantage. And that is because he is active at darker times of the day. Now earlier someone said that owls are nocturnal. That is sometimes and kind of true. This owl is actually not nocturnal. He's active at dawn and dusk. Does anyone know the word, the very fancy word for an animal active at dawn and dusk? Yeah. What was it? I don't believe so, no. Cat, what was it?
I don't know.
Yes, do you have another guess? Diurnal is active during the day. So there's another word, and not a lot of people know this one. It is crepuscular. So he is a crepuscular animal, active near sunrise and sunset. Not so much in the middle of the night, but still, he still needs big eyes to let him see, because if you've ever been walking around at dawn and dusk, it's not very bright out yet. And those big eyes act like huge windows. Imagine if you're in a house and it has one little tiny window. At dawn and dusk, it's going to be really dark inside that house. But if you're in a house and there's a whole wall of windows, it's going to be a little bit easier to see your way around. So by having those big windows through, he can see better at the times of day that he is active. Now, there is a problem, though, with big eyes. If we had eyes the size of our fists, they would just fall out of our heads. That would not be very good. I would like to keep my eyeballs in my head. So how does he keep those huge eyes in that tiny little skull? Well, their skull is actually quite different from ours. they have these very well-developed sclerotic rings, which is a very fancy word. It just means a ring of bone around his eyeball. And in fact, his eyeballs are not balls at all. They are tubes, like a can of soup. So those rings go around those eye tubes and help to hold them in place so they do not fall out of his face. Now, it does come with a slight issue, though, which is that he can't do this. He can't move his eyes at all. They are fixed forward by that bone. So because he can't move his eyes, what does he move instead to see around? Yeah. His whole head, exactly. Now, has anyone here heard that owls can turn their heads 360 degrees all the way around? You can? That would be cool. Now, unfortunately, that is a myth. No animal in nature can turn their head 360 degrees all the way around. And if they did, we would call that demonic possession. No, he does not turn his head that far, but he still turns a lot farther than us. If you see how far you can turn your head, it's probably just about side to side, maybe about 180 degrees. He can turn 270 degrees. So if I could do that, I would be turning my head to the side, behind myself, and over the next shoulder without moving the rest of my body. And part of the way that they're able to do that is because they have more bones in their neck. We only have 7 bones in our neck. In fact, all mammals only have 7 bones in their neck, even giraffes. They just have really long bones. But raptors here, like Miami, have 14 bones in their neck. So those extra neck bones gives them extra flexibility so that they can turn their head all the way around. Now, the other thing someone mentioned was his little tufts. And he kind of looks like a little baby gray horned owl because of those tufts. But like I said, gray horned owls are much bigger. Even baby gray horned owls would be much bigger than he is. So what are those tufts doing there? Now, does anyone think that they have to do with his ears? Good. Yes, they do not have anything to do with his ears, even though they are called ear tufts. And they're kind of in the same spot that our ears are, or maybe a dog's ears are. A much more fun word for them is plumicorns, like plumage and unicorn. But those plumicorns are actually for his camouflage. So we mentioned earlier, he's the color of a tree. If I put him up against a tree right now, he would sort of disappear into the bark. I don't have a tree to do that with, but if I did, it would be very cool. You can imagine it. But the problem is his predators are other owls. Barred owls, great horned owls, they would love to eat this guy. That's part of the reason he's active at dawn and dusk and not in the middle of the night when other owls are more active. He wants to avoid the other owls at all costs. So those tufts, or those owls, have much, much better night vision than us, over 100 times better than ours. So they would still probably see this guy up against a tree if he's just sitting there, because his outline doesn't match up with the tree. But thankfully, he can shapeshift. When he gets spooked, if he hears another owl or sees them coming nearby, he goes into stick mode. He gets really tall, sucks all the feathers into his body, closes his eyes, and puts those ear tufts straight up. And he looks just like a piece of bark. He blends in perfectly with the outline of that tree, and you wouldn't even know that he's there. Why do you think he has to close his eyes? Yeah. Yeah, look how bright those eyes are. That would definitely be easy for probably even us to see, but certainly something like a great horned owl flying around in the night. So by going into stick mode, he's able to evade those predators. Yes, exactly. Now you just have to put your ear tufts up too. His ear tufts are a little bit up right now. That just means he's alert. He is not fully in stick mode. If he were fully freaked out, he would be standing up tall, closing his eyes, and not taking food at all. So this just means it's a little bit strange in here. What are all these people doing here? I've never been here before, but he's still doing totally fine. So I said his name was Miami. He comes to us from Miami, Florida. Maybe there's another Miami, but no, he comes from the one that we all know. Now, how did he end up here? That's a great question. When he was a baby, his nest tree was unfortunately cut down by a logger. And so he fell out of bed, bumped his head, and couldn't see out of one of his eyes. Somehow, on the way down, when his nest was falling down and all the babies landed on the ground, he bonked his head and suffered basically a bird concussion. It damaged the part of his brain that sends or receives signals from his right eye. So that eye looks perfectly fine to us, but he cannot see anything out of that side. So thankfully, the person who cut down the tree did realize, oh no, there's a bunch of baby owls on the ground, I have to take them somewhere. And they brought them to a rehab center in Miami. And thankfully, all of his siblings were totally fine, not a scratch, able to go back into the wild. But because he could only see out of one eye, he was deemed non-releasable. Why do you think it might be difficult for an owl like this to survive with only one eye? Yeah, in the pink. Yeah, maybe a predator approaching from this side, he would have no idea that it's coming. There's another reason that it would be kind of difficult. Yeah, what do you think?
Because you wouldn't be able to hide in time.
He wouldn't be able to hide in time, yeah.
And you wouldn't be able to look back in time. Like if
True.
predators coming behind him.
Yeah, he wouldn't be able to see back behind him as fast because that one eye doesn't have vision. But remember, he's not just a prey item, he is also a predator himself. So by having only one eye, do you think it would be easy for him to hunt? No, it would be pretty difficult. So he was deemed non-releasable because of that injury. However, he is still thankfully flighted and healthy in other ways. And that rehab place in Miami didn't have room for a screech owl, or they didn't need a screech owl. And so they put out a call to say, anyone want a screech owl for their education programs? And Miami ended up making his way all the way up here. And he's been at VINS with us for 8 years now. Does anyone have any questions about Miami or about screech owls? Yeah.
Well, I just want to tell you something that I am 8 years old. Also, you just stepped.
Oh, that's okay. I'll clean it up later. They poop all the time. Any other questions? Yeah, back there. Oh, they're probably going to live for about the same as Ferrisburg would, so into their teens, maybe up to 15, 20 if we are lucky. And that's in captivity, I forgot to mention. In the wild, probably like 5 years on average. Obviously, life is harder in the wild. They're not being hand-fed, and they are not being protected from predators at all times. So they live a little bit less long when they're not in captivity. Yes?
Are you going to keep the big owl?
I really hope that the big owl wants to come out, but like I said, we do have choice-based training. I would never grab one of our birds to make them come out because we want them to have a positive experience with education, and we don't want them to be afraid of us or afraid of you. And believe me, you do not want to see a scared owl out here. He would be trying to jump and fly around, and it would not be a fun time. We do not want an owl loose in this room. Any other questions? Okay. We'll bring Miami back to his crate. I will absolutely try, yes. I know. I really wanted the big owl to come out too, and I'm sorry that he's been so disobedient so far. So, before I grab him, as I was mentioning about these rings of bone, now this is an excellent example of those rings that I was talking about. So this is actually a snowy owl skull, so it's much bigger than the skull of our little screech owl, but you can see those really well-developed rings right around their eyes. Versus, this is the skull of an osprey. You can tell that they don't have as big of eyes, so they don't need to have that much of a bone holding it in place. But it can be a little bit tricky. Because what do you think this skull belongs to? Raise your hand if you think it is an owl skull. Raise your hand if you think it's not an owl skull. This is actually an owl skull. And the reason being that these sclerotic rings, once we have just the skull, once the owl has passed away and all the flesh is gone, they are very fragile. So one drop and those would probably break right off. So if you do find a skeleton out in the wild and you're wondering what it is, just because it doesn't have these doesn't necessarily mean that it's not an owl. So these two are both still owls, even though you can only see the ring on one of them. All right, I will try one more time to get our final owl out, and I really hope he makes an appearance. but we shall see if he wants to join us. All right, unfortunately, our big owl has said, absolutely not, I'm not coming out today. Even for the biggest piece of food ever. He did back away from me, so I take that as a sign of, okay, we're gonna stop trying now. But I will tell you a little bit about him, and I do have a wing and a foot from his species. He was a barred owl. That was the first call that we heard earlier. So that call is really something that a lot of people know. It's very easy to remember because there's a fun little way, a fun little sort of song that goes with it that we've invented. It sounds like, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? So if you hear that, it would be a barred owl out in the night, but they do make all kinds of other calls. They make sort of monkey noises. They can make other hooting calls, hissing noises, clacking noises. If you hear clacking, back away, that owl is not happy. That is universal owl for leave me alone. But they do make all sorts of calls. In fact, this morning I heard 2 barred owls in the woods doing a duet together. So now is actually a really great time if you are interested in trying to see these birds out in the wild. Owls are pretty early in the nesting season. They tend to be nesting and finding their mates in their nests in the late winter, early spring, versus a lot of other birds that wait until spring is more, in full bloom. So if you do want to try and find one of these birds, because they're so good at hiding and because they fly so quietly, your best bet is to listen for those calls and then quietly follow them until you find where that bird may be. Most owls are not migratory, including the barred owl and including the eastern screech owl. So if you find an owl, it's probably going to be there for its whole life, unless it's a baby owl, in which case it will probably go off to find its own territory the next year. But most owls will have the same territory year-round, so if you do happen to have an owl nearby or in your yard, I wouldn't be surprised if you're hearing it again the next year. But again, nesting season, sort of the best time to hear them making their calls, and therefore is the best time to try and find them out in the wild if that is something that you are interested in trying to do. Now, barred owls, kind of like eastern screech owls, are also crepuscular normally, but they're a little bit less picky. They'll be active in the middle of the night. They might also be active in the day if they're hungry or something bothers them and they decide to move to a different tree. So it's a little bit easier to find them because they're active at more times of the night. But if you go at dawn or dusk, you're likely to hear screech owls and barred owls. If you want to find a great horned owl, those guys would be strictly nocturnal in the middle of the night. And they make very stereotypical hooting sounds. They are the most stereotypical of owls. They go, hoo, 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 hoo. So if you hear that, it is probably a great horned owl. Do you have a question about owls or about anything?
How big are barn owls?
How big are barn owls? Barn owls, we have 2 barn owls at Vin's, and they're about this big. Our male weighs about 1¼ pounds, and our female barn owl weighs about 1.5 pounds. Any other questions? Yeah, over here. you have a question?
How many screech owls do you have at Vince?
We have 2 glove screech owls, so 2 owls that do things like this, meeting people on glove, and they're comfortable with that. But we have 3 screech owls that just live there in an exhibit permanently. They don't come and do education programs, but they do live there. Yes?
Why are screech owls in Vermont?
Why are they in Vermont? Probably because there's enough food for them. Screech owls are eating similar things to our kestrels. They eat things like little mice or voles or insects, and there's a lot of that around here. So as long as they can find enough food, it's a good enough place for them to live. Yeah.
Why are they called barn owls?
Why do you think they're called barn owls? Yeah, they like to live in barns. So, of course, the name barn owl is sort of a modern word. They were not living in barns when they evolved millions of years ago. However, we did notice that they like to live in sort of old, abandoned human buildings. They are cavity nesters like a lot of other owls, but they're more likely to move into old buildings than a barred owl or a great horned owl, for example. So people found them in their barns a lot, and they got the name barn owl. Barn owls are actually very uncommon in Vermont, so if you do see one around here, I would be shocked. They do not like the woods, they like open areas, and Vermont is a lot of woods. So it's less likely you'll find them here, more likely to find them a little bit farther south. Yeah?
Well, in the spring there is a field that's an open place, and it's also a meadow. We drive out side by side there in the spring.
Well, maybe you should go look for barn owls there. They could be there, I don't know. Yes?
I've got a farm and a barn, and one time we saw a barn owl that was hurt, and we saw it, so we did see a barn owl.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, they are around here. They're just a lot less common, so very lucky if you can find one. Any other questions about owls or about kestrels? Do you have a question back there? Okay. Is it a
Humongous barn owl.
oh, yeah?
Right over the road when I go to school.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. They are pretty brave. They're more likely to be found near humans. Wow, yeah, that is awesome. Thanks for sharing. Great. All right, well, thank you all for being here this morning. I'm sorry again that our 3rd owl did not want to make an appearance, or our 2nd owl did not want to make an appearance, but it is how it goes. Sometimes they are not interested in coming out and doing education, and we say, okay, hopefully next time. But I'm really glad that Miami did come out in the end, and we got to meet our little screech owl. As promised, I have a bunch of biofacts up here, so now is your time to come up and touch anything you want to touch, ask any more questions that you want to ask, but otherwise, thanks for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.